Hello, I'm Marcus Railton, and welcome to Series 3 of the ScotsCare Podcast. ScotsCare is the only charity dedicated to helping disadvantaged Scots across London, breaking the cycle of poverty through services such as financial support, homelessness, mental health therapy, family support, advocacy, sheltered housing, social events and befriending, amongst others. In the new series, I'll be chatting with guests from all backgrounds, all with one thing in common: Scottish roots. Listen to the ScotsCare Podcast to hear their story. Today's episode features a truly remarkable guest, JJ Chalmers, a broadcaster, Invictus Games medallist, and former Royal Marine, whose story is one of resilience, purpose, and reinvention. JJ first came to national attention following his service with the Royal Marines in Afghanistan, where he was seriously injured in an IED explosion. His recovery journey, both physical and mental, has been extraordinary, and he went on to represent Great Britain in the inaugural Invictus Games, winning medals and inspiring many with his determination. Since then, he's become a familiar face on our screens, working as a presenter across major sporting events and national broadcasts, including the Olympics and Paralympic Games. What stands out is not just his professionalism on camera, but the perspective he brings, grounded, thoughtful, and shaped by experiences far beyond broadcasting. He's been broadcasting for over a decade now, so we chatted about the amount of work that goes into looking as cool and calm and unflappable as he actually does on screen. We chatted about imposter syndrome and how many people suffer from this, and how his time in the Royal Marines actually prepared him in many ways, but different ways, for a career in broadcasting. JJ is one of the most humble and modest people that you'll ever meet. We spoke about his dad. His dad is a very senior clergyman in the Church of Scotland, and I could tell from the way he spoke about his dad how much he admires and loves him. We did chat about Afghanistan, and I wasn't too sure about how much to ask him about that experience, but he was very candid about it, and he spoke about that fateful day in Helmand Province, 27th of May 2011, when his life changed forever. Oh, and we did chat about loss of privacy and how fame can lead to a certain amount of loss of privacy. And the reason I bring it up, because JJ was talking about something about being in Asda, and when you're just out for the messages, which it wasn't until I listened back to our recording that I found that so funny. If you are not from Scotland, or if you don't live in Scotland, you might not realise that when JJ refers to the messages, he's actually talking about your weekly shop, your grocery shop. I did find it very funny. I played it to my wife, who's English. She didn't understand what he was talking about. Brilliant. Anywho, without further ado, please welcome JJ Chalmers to the ScotsCare Podcast.
ScotsCare.
JJ, thanks for doing this.
You're very welcome.
Are you well? You looking fit?
Yeah, I'm good. I've survived winter. That's what I've done. And so it's time to sort of open up and get back stuck into another year, basically.
I went to the cinema last night. I went to see that film, Hail Mary, with Ryan Gosling.
Oh, wow.
And it's nonsense, but I kind of enjoyed it. And then I came home and I read a review of it, and it said, you know, it's a bit of fun for a suffocatingly bleak 2026.
Yeah, fair enough.
I kind of thought, oh, suffocate, that's a good way of describing it so far. It's all
yeah, that's a good review of the year rather than the film. I suppose so, although I'm looking forward to seeing that film. It's made by the same guy that wrote The Martian, and that's one of my favourites.
Oh, I love The Martian. Yeah. It's long. It's 2.5 hours long, so I think it could have been a wee bit shorter, but I'm just because I'm getting old and I get tired. I think that's where it is. I was like, 25 to 11, I should be in bed by now. Yeah. Anywho, can I start off with a bit of flattery?
Oh, well, that was... Go on.
Go on then.
Twist my arm.
I watched you in the Winter Olympics, right? And I was watching you talking about, I don't know, figure skating or luge or freestyle skiing, and everything you seem to be an expert on. And I wondered how much you are an expert and how much you just is bloody hard work on your part.
Thank you for the flattery. Yes, that's a big part of it. Is I think there's three things to it, actually. Part of it is hard work. Yes, it's doing the hard yards and getting your head into books and doing the revision and being across stuff, which, by my absolute honesty, is the bit I probably find the hardest. So when you say hard work, it, it, it's not work. Let's be honest. I get to go to the Olympics for a living. Come on. But of the components of the job, that's the one I find the most tasking, getting up to speed. Having said that, another part of it is that that was my fourth Olympics. I've done 2 or 3 winter games as well. So actually, what it becomes is these are lived experiences now. I'll forever remember Matt Weston winning gold because I was there. And so you have that sort of accrued knowledge through a decade of doing it. And then the last part, and I think it might hide the fact that I don't know everything, is that at the end of the day, what I am is a fan and an enthusiast. And that's what I sort of lead with. And so if I just turn up showing the right level of excitement for what I'm engaged in, if you watch closely, it's not that I know what I'm talking about, it's that I care about what I'm talking about.
I think that comes across. I think if you and Matt Weston went down the pub, you would have the same conversation with him down the pub as you would do in a BBC studio. And I think that's kind of part of your appeal, because you come, I'm not saying you're an everyman, because you're an everyman plus 50% with all your expertise, but you come across very natural. That's kind of your winning style, I think.
Yeah, I mean, thank you. That's a fantastic review. And one that I appreciate, because that is what I go for. Now, you are right, you acknowledge that, through a life of several different things, I have accrued knowledge over the years and have great lived experience. But yeah, my biggest thing is just to turn up and be that enthusiast. And always remember, particularly when you're presenting for the BBC to a casual audience, that whilst people are tuning in because they are big curling fans, and people are turning in because they know their skeleton or their rugby league or whatever it is I cover, the majority of the audience is basically my mum, who's a casual fan of the sport for the time that it's on, and you have to go in at a level that they will not just understand, but they'll enjoy, because there's plenty of other stuff that they could be doing and using their time and attention on. And so I have gone for the somewhat everyman approach. And it's interesting because it's taken me 10 years to truly arrive at that. I think if you watched my career back, you would see times when I was sort of, borrowing things from Hazel Irvine, borrowing things from Claire or Gabby, whoever it might be. But actually now it's, well, no, JJ just does it JJ's way.
That's interesting, because I was going to ask you about that. I was wondering, was there ever a point over that 10 years where you kind of go, right, I've got it, I feel comfortable in my own skin now, and how long that took you?
It's such a good question, because I asked Jonathan Edwards that question at the start of my career. He was one of the people instrumental in getting me started in TV. And he told...
Jumper.
Yeah, triple jumper, world record holder. And well, he presented the Invictus Games in 2014 when I competed, so that's why I got to know him. And he said it took him around 10 years to feel truly comfortable, truly like he belonged in that space. And so I was always conscious of that. And I think the first time I had a similar feeling to that was the Olympics in the 2020 Tokyo Olympics, albeit in 2021. So it's about five years into my career, basically, when I walked into the studio, the big green screen studio in Salford, and sort of inhabited the space and was the sort of, lead presenter. And whilst it's a team of everybody doing their thing, it all kind of centers around you, in the nicest possible way, in the most humble way I can put it. But that is, all the cameras are pointing at you, and you can either feel uncomfortable about that, and you can also feel like you don't deserve to be there. But the whole time you're feeling that everybody else does, and you're working with all these experienced guys, from camera operators through to floor managers through to makeup artists, and certainly on the outside anyway, they don't seem to be showing that they feel nervous, or they don't belong there. And so I think that was a point at which I started to believe it and started to sort of inhabit it on the outside as well.
I think it's an interesting combination, isn't it? Because I think a lot of people talk about what's it called, imposter syndrome. And sometimes I don't think it's fair to say it's imposter syndrome, because I think it's because you care. And I think when you stop feeling nervous, it's because you've stopped caring to a certain extent.
Completely, I would agree with that. I mean, I agree that imposter syndrome exists, and you know, one of the reasons I agree is because we've all got it, and actually, it's such a comforting thing when you suddenly snap out of it and go, everybody's feeling the same here. Nobody actually knows what's going on. You know, actually, life is entirely made up. Like none of this stuff is real, really. Like it's all things we've just chosen to do, especially in my walk of life. But as for the caring bit, you know, people. I have an interesting relationship with you know, nerves and adrenaline and dopamine, you know, accrued from a time in the Marines, if I'm being honest. But really, it's this sense that whenever I'm doing a rehearsal, say before we do a live program, and now thankfully I know most of the editors and directors and whatnot that I work with now, but when I first started out, I'm rubbish at rehearsals because the nerves are not truly there yet, the adrenaline's not there yet, and I just kind of bumble my way through. And again, in the olden days, the team would be looking at me and go, God, this is going to be a long show. If this is what he's like, can't even get the first words out. As soon as the theme tune plays for the show that we're on, there's all this adrenaline and all these nerves arrive, which to some people will break them. But to me, and because of the training that I had from my time in the Marines, that's when I'm able to go, right, now I can turn this up, and I can, you know, instead of it having it push me down, it raises me up.
You mentioned, you know, people are just making life up, and I think you're right. And I don't want to get too existential about it this time in the morning before you've even finished your coffee. But do you ever think if my life, say you hadn't gone to Afghanistan, what happened to you hadn't happened to you, and there hadn't been the Invictus Games, do you ever lie awake at night and thought, I wonder where that path would have taken me, what my life would have been doing now? And I ask you that just because you've gone from being in the Royal Marines, which is, you know, a tough job, to being a mainstream television presenter. It's such a, and I hate to use this word, American word, it's such a pivot, JJ, yeah?
It's such a pivot. Yeah, listen, I suppose I don't lie awake at night wondering what it would have been like, but I absolutely find myself in circumstances where I can inhabit both thoughts, can be present at the same time and somewhat true. And that is, I'll find myself in a circumstance like being at the Olympics, like being in amongst, you know, a gold medal winning moment, and you're just lost in it. And then when it sort of has passed you by and the camera lights, you know, turned off, and you suddenly are back in the room, as it were, there's part of you that goes, how the hell did I get here? Especially as you say, when you're like, what is Lance Corporal Chalmers, Royal Marines, doing in this room? Like, this makes no sense whatsoever. How did this happen? And then at the same time, you hold this thought of, well, actually, no, it's 10 years you've been doing this for, and it's not your first rodeo. And it's because you went to that class and you did this thing and you met that person. Like, there is a logical sequence of events that led you to this thing. So both is kind of true. But I just had at the weekend, literally on Saturday, our 15-year reunion of us going to Afghanistan. So we got half the company back together, 60 blokes. And I suppose in that room, you suddenly realize all the different walks of life that I could have taken, you know, and there's guys that are still in the Marines. There's guys that work in, you know, the obvious industries of security or cyber, whatever it might be, you know, project managers. And then there's guys doing absolutely left field stuff like I am. And you suddenly realize, you know, you could have ended up in any direction. If I'd stayed in the Marines, I'd be 1 year away from retirement. That's where I would be. Wow. Isn't that wild? Yeah, 21 years. Wild. It was 21 years ago I joined.
Yeah. Let me ask you a nosy question then. Just, do you ever find it difficult? You don't have to answer this. You don't ever find it difficult when you're hanging around with these blokes and you were in the Marines with them, and now you're in La television land and you've been all over the world? And do you ever find that you don't want to be boastful and go, "Oh, just at the Olympics and I was doing that"? Does the modesty ever kick in?
Well, yeah, and I mean they're the first people to put me straight back in my box. You can be absolutely sure of that. And it is a funny thing. The Marines are very good at it. They're very good at like, absolutely chopping your knees out, as they should in these sort of things. Like, all right, big time, we've all done stuff. But equally, giving you a pat on the back and just saying, "Mate, we're so proud. Boy, done good," you know. And that's really lovely. But yeah, absolutely. I never want to, much like the whole not wanting to take things for granted. I never want to take for granted how special it is to get to be at the Olympics and to have experienced the moments in history and the moments in of extraordinary opportunity that I've been granted. But equally, it is just your job, and so again, there's a strange thing where you have to recognize the brilliance of it. You have to live in the brilliance of it, but equally, you can't get carried away with it, because all you're doing is just doing the thing, doing the thing that puts a roof over your head. But again, I suppose actually, if you really strip it away, take the opportunities away, and which in themselves are incredible. Actually, it's probably pretty amazing to just have a job that you go to work and you love what you do. Most people probably don't actually have that privilege even. Having said that, when you're in a room full of Marines, as absolutely horrendous as our job could be, it's still the best job we've ever had.
Yeah.
And so actually in that room, they know exactly what it's like to do the job that to love what you do for a living.
ScotsCare, helping to break the cycle of deprivation for Scots in London.
Let me take you back to the beginning. I mean, you grew up in Edinburgh, and your father is a senior clergyman, which I in the Church of Scotland. Did you live in a faith-filled house?
No, not particularly. I mean, I grew up for the first part of my life in the manse, and so and you attended church on a Sunday and were sort of part of the apparatus of that. I was the minister's son, and at the very least had like 1,000 grannies, because all these all the elders felt rightly and lovely the sort of ownership over you. You were their little boy as well, which was nice. But I always say this of my father: he's not sort of overtly or obviously sort of religious. I don't grow up in a house with crosses all over the walls. If you met my old man, he would talk to you about golf and gardening long before he would talk to you about theology. But I grew up in a house with decent moral code and decent values, which of course are based in Christian faith, I suppose. But like all good things, they're just good life lessons, and spent a lot of time in Sunday school having those things brought to life through that. But yeah, so not overtly religious, but as I say, people do find it quite funny, because he was a very senior clergyman, and the chief of the kirk, as it were. And I almost have to pinch myself, because I just see him as my dad. And then I'm like, oh, you hear him preaching on a Sunday still, when he does a little bit here and there, and you're like, God, you're good at this. He's a good talker. He knows what he's talking about.
Oh, at least you've inherited that.
Yeah.
Now, I just want to kind of trace your path from, child into the Royal Marines. Were you in the Boys Brigade or the Scouts? How did it come about?
It was the cadets, yeah. I was in the CCF and I was in the Royal Marine Cadets. That was probably the biggest and most formative thing that I did. And I suppose, one, I just loved the cadets. And one thing I would say of that organisation, or the Boys Brigade, or my kids are in the Cubs and the Beavers at the moment, like, if the cadets is all the experience I would have had of the armed forces, as it were, and I hadn't gone on to have a career in the military, it still would have been an incredible thing to have experienced, and would have absolutely shaped who I was as a person, much like that sort of value system that I kind of spoke of. So that was the main sort of initial influence, but equally, it was at a time, this was the early 2000s, so this was at a time when the Royal Marines in particular were all over the newspaper, because this was post 9/11, this was, the invasion of Iraq, this was, it was 2001 through 2003. If you look back at those papers, the Royal Marines were sort of front and centre on what was going on in the world of conflict. And their professionalism was the thing that sort of struck me. And having been a cadet, I got to spend time with these guys who did extraordinary and exceptional things. And then the other thing that struck me is the sort of brotherhood that they had while they were doing it. This amazing thing where, you got to go to work doing a job that was truly important, truly difficult, but it was, I don't know if fun is the right word, but it was sort of, it was so special because of the group of people that you got to do it with.
So you were in the reserves. I'm just trying to work out how it worked for you. What made you make certain choices, JJ?
Yeah.
You were in the reserves, but you went to Edinburgh University. So was there an idea for a different career before you became a full-time Royal Marine?
Yeah, it was. I joined the reserves because I could see that, university, ticking that box, getting that thing done, and ultimately becoming a teacher was something I wanted to do. And I could either do it then when I was sort of full of energy and, and capacity, I suppose, but know that I would get those qualifications, tick those boxes, go back to the Marines, and then become a teacher once it was all said and done. Because, if I'd gone straight from university to teaching, I was looking at like a 46, 47-year teaching career, which would be amazing, but exhausting. Yeah. So it was like, oh, actually, you can do this thing first. But I actually found a world where I could do both at the same time, essentially. And because, I was 17 years old and I had endless, boundless energy, I was able to do two fairly significant things at the same time.
And I don't want to ask you something you've explained 1,000 times, but just for anyone who doesn't know, could you explain when you became a full-time Royal Marine and you're deployed to Afghanistan, and explain to us what happened there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd be 22, 23 years old, I think, at the time. And yeah, we talk about university and teaching. I ticked all those boxes and had that qualification. So then I was like, right, that's that done. Put it to one side and go back to the Marines full time. So I just wanted to take up a full-time contract with the Marines, but equally, the easiest way to do that was essentially just to put your chit straight in and say, I want to go to one of the fighting units that's going to deploy to Afghanistan. So I picked up straight back into the Corps, and I joined 4-2 Commando, Royal Marines, that were based down in Plymouth. And we started, because of the rotation of things, we went straight into our post-deployment training. So we spent about 6 or 7 months or something like that getting ready for Afghanistan. And then from that, we deployed almost exactly 15 years ago, actually, to the day. So we deployed in the March of 2011 to a place called Nadi Ali. So we were in Helmand Province, and we were doing what was kind of called ground holding. So we were working at these small checkpoints, and we were essentially the military police for the entire area that we sort of inhabited in. So our job was just to keep law and order, really, for want of a better phrase, and to allow redevelopment to happen. So that's what was happening throughout the time when I was in Afghanistan. But on the 27th of May 2011, my company, J Company, was part of a much, much bigger operation to not just sort of hold ground, but to take it back from the Taliban. So we'd moved into an area that had never really seen British forces or Afghan forces or any international boots on the ground, as it were. And we were tasked with sort of taking us back from the insurgency. So we kind of went into the hornet's nest. We found ourselves in a very sort of chaotic and what we would call kinetic period. So lots of fighting, lots of getting up close with the enemy and sort of wrestling this piece of ground from them, which they obviously did not want to give up. And as we went through that operation, one of the things that came to light through intelligence was there was a bomb-making factory in the area, which is where they were making all the improvised explosive devices, the IEDs, that were the main thing hurting people at the time, both military, but equally civilians that were, just going about their work, Afghan security forces, you name it. Like, I think over 70% of the casualties were coming from these IEDs. So if we found where the factory was, we could sort of, we could shut the operation down. That's what we were doing when I was wounded. We went into one of these factories. They had booby-trapped it for obvious reasons. One of my friends triggered a pressure plate, which sets off a huge bomb, basically. That bomb goes off. Long story short, it claimed the lives of 2 of my friends, our Afghan interpreter, so 2 Marines, one of the Afghans killed, myself and our medic very seriously wounded, and another lad got a bit of a concussion. So about half our guys were either killed or injured that day. But lo and behold, I managed to make it out of there. Just.
I want to ask you about, you're obviously a very brave man, but before and after, are you fearful in these situations? And then when this happens to you, people talk about grief and talk about pain, but there must have been fear as well that your number was up. You're a very young man at that point.
Yeah, it's interesting, and in the last year in particular, I've done a lot of work on my mental health. And when I say work, I had bad mental health and I need to fix it. But equally, I'm now at a place where I'm trying to improve my mental health through certain treatments. And so I've done a lot of time reflecting, re-experiencing, what it was like to be in Afghanistan in particular. And fear is a big part of it. And, I've already talked about the way I sort of harness fear, in television, for example. So my ability to deal with that fear is the interesting thing. So yes, when I was in Afghan, it was scary. There was things we did which were terrifying and very real. And some of it was things that you were doing. Sometimes it was if somebody got hurt and you allowed yourself to think, oh, what if it's me next? Or what if it's that? But the reality is, whilst there's fear, and it's, first of all, it's not irrational fear, like it's fear for good reason. There's genuinely things to be scared of there. But it's the way that we were trained and the way that we were able to deal with that fear, which I think is the remarkable thing. So the fear was there and you were experiencing, heightened emotions, adrenaline, all of that sort of stuff. It's just that we were able to harness those things to be able to do what was required. And so it makes you, it doesn't just counteract fear. It actually makes fear this incredible driver that makes you even better. I suppose that's the strange thing about it. So that's what you use throughout your time in Afghanistan. And equally, at the point when I was wounded and I was lying there on the floor, now at first it was fairly terrifying. And yes, you were like, holy crap, this could be it for me. But that same set of emotions and drive, the same thing happens where you suddenly go, right, what do you actually have to do to get through this? And lo and behold, for me, it was one, hope that there was still guys alive to come and help me, which was happening. So thankfully, I couldn't do anything for myself despite my efforts. It was really down to everybody else. So what could I do? Well, grit my teeth and get on with it is basically the bit I could do. And, this was the worst thing I've ever had to do, the most gritting of teeth has ever been required, but it's not something I wasn't capable of. So I kind of quickly went from, God, this could be all over, to what are you actually going to do about it? And just, as my Ayrshire granny says, just get on with it. And that's kind of what I had to do, was just get on with it.
Does it, I don't mean this to sound flippant, but does it give you a sense of perspective, and can you hold on to that? Because what I feel is that we all go through a lot of, not to the same extent as you have, JJ, but when you go through turmoil in your life and you go, oh, that sharpened the focus a wee bit, and then next week you're back to doing the same crap you were the week before. But have you been able in your life to hang on to that kind of sense of perspective and have more pragmatism, although you already strike me as quite a pragmatic person?
Yeah, so such a good question. And I mean, the simple answer is yes. I mean, first of all, people when asking that question will also ask, like, did you find your resilience in that moment? And I was like, well, no. If I hadn't been resilient, I wouldn't have passed commando training and I wouldn't have been in that circumstance. So inherently, I had that sort of pragmatism and that stuff in me. Whether it always existed, it probably did, but had been harnessed and improved by my time in the military. In a moment like that, and it's interesting what you said there. We all experience hardships and we all need to have resilience and whatnot. I suppose in my circumstance, because again, you even said it, you were like, oh, not like you did. Now, that might be true. Most people don't experience something as significant as I did. Having said that, that's a blessing and a curse, because it's such a huge dose of perspective that it will basically never leave you. And, I have to live with it for the rest of my life. I have a disability and, there are things that affect my life every day because of that day and because of that moment and because of decisions in my early life. So it was partly a huge dose of it and then a continued experiencing of it that means that, yeah, like I'm able to sort of pinch myself in those moments where you might feel sorry for yourself, or you might, need to find something, to get through something uncomfortable in your life. But my point is, actual in some ways it's about perspective, because we all go through these things every single day, but some of them barely just register, and so your ledger's not being topped up with what's required to make you appreciate what you've got, or look inside, or whatever it might be. But I would never, ever, ever want to dismiss the hardships that people experience just because I happen to have experienced a larger one once. Because at the very least, I can also see that I'm in some ways fortunate for having experienced it, because it redresses the way that I approach life for the rest of my days.
Love what ScotsCare does? Help us spread the word. Share this podcast, tell a friend, or give us a shout out on social media. Like and share our posts. The more people that know us, the more Scots we can support.
Is support and legislation getting better for men and women in armed forces that suffer from PTSD? Is that better these days?
Well, I mean, first of all, it's an entirely different, not just armed forces, but world from where we first started to really take sight of it, 20 years ago. The time when I joined the military, attitudes within the military were pretty poor, but in society even worse, about what mental health was, and how we had to look after it, and what it could do. I think there's a lot I could say about it, but for example, obviously I was just being at this reunion, 60 guys there. If you had told me that basically every single one of them would have experienced in the last 15 years some form of poor mental health as a result of that time in Afghanistan, if you told me as we left Afghanistan that was going to happen, I genuinely wouldn't have believed you. I really thought it was going to be a thing that just happened to a small minority of us, and that most of us would take it in our stride and it wouldn't be an issue. I now realise that that's nonsense. Every single person is going to feel some sort of after effect from what had happened. Now, the good news was, out of those guys that all admitted that, 6 years ago they'd had this, 1 year ago they'd had this, whatever it was, every one of them had found some sort of support to get through that, and was now in a good place with it. Still living with it to some degree, as we all will, but some guys who were still in service had been given that support directly through the military. So, they're sick at work, basically. And so it's no different if they twisted their ankle on an exercise or fallen out the back of a helicopter. They were getting put back together. And I don't know if that was available when I was in service. And then, as for those of us who have had to deal with this after service, so as veterans, as people that have been discharged for one reason or another, I know that I got my mental health support through the Royal Marines charity. So some of it is absolutely being, handled by Help for Heroes, Combat Strength, Royal Marines charity. Now, you could have an argument as to that it shouldn't be charities picking up that bill. It should be the government. But equally, I certainly know in this point that at least those services exist, whether they're third sector, but military third sector, or, government provided. And so, to answer your question, everybody's getting the help, or, in my experience, everyone that I know that's needed that help has been able to access it and use it. But that would not have been the picture 20 years ago at all.
Let me ask you something. It's a wee bit different if I've got you just for a few more minutes. I want to ask you about your change in career and also protecting your mental health within working in the television industry. Because you come from being in the Royal Marines, where you could have nipped down Sainsbury's, bought some toilet roll. Nobody would have ever known who you were. But now you're JJ Chalmers off the telly, and your life is scrutinised. And how do you deal with that? Is there a loss of privacy there?
Yeah, there is, to a degree. Now, what I would say is, whatever level of fame I've got, I'm not Tom Cruise, so that's I've got a kind of a lovely level of fame in that whenever anyone speaks to me, comes up to me in the big Asdas or whatever it is, they're just so nice. People are just being lovely, and so sometimes it can be a bit off-putting. You're there just trying to get on with your life, or get your messages, and you're with your kids or whatever it is, but everyone's always really lovely about it, so that is a nice thing. I think the time that I experienced it on a really big scale, which starts to give you a bit of an appreciation of what it must be like to be a Tom Cruise, was when I did Strictly, and particularly because of social media. It is such a big, noisy show, and I did the series during COVID as well. So there was nothing except for COVID. There was nothing else happening in the world. So there was a lot of eyeballs on us, and a lot of people wanting an escape, which was lovely, and because that was such a great thing that we were able to provide at that time. But equally, it comes with scrutiny. I mean, the whole show is based on the premise of judgment. You're judged from the moment your dance finishes by the judges, but then you're immediately being judged by the audience, to the vote for you. And all of that comes with this echo chamber of people talking to one another and people judging who you are as a person because you're crap at the Paso Doble. And it's pretty unfair if you're being completely honest. You're like, but anyway. So it definitely was an experience. It definitely something I would say I would go as far as not, I want to say I struggled with, but it was more, I got to a place with it where I was like, you're not experiencing this correctly and you're letting it affect you. And so I was able to then reframe and learn from it. And I think the biggest thing I learned from it was, if someone's going to judge you for those things, then it's nonsense. Like, they're not, it doesn't change who you are as a person. They're kind of, they're going about their life, and their little opinion about your dance or whatever shouldn't affect who you are. Who are you going to listen to? Well, you're going to listen to your friends and your family and those that love you. You're going to listen to your, dance partner in Strictly. But, whenever someone says something mean about my coverage of the Olympics and their opinions about it, it's just their opinion. Now, the opinion that matters is my boss at BBC. Now, if he has something to say about whether I did a good or bad job, then I'm going to listen to that person. But actually, you can't please everybody every time. Absolutely no chance of that. Having said that, the last thing I'll say on it is when it comes to that feedback, as nice as it is to have somebody come up to you in ASDA or say something nice about you on the internet, you also have to, if you're going to ignore the bad stuff, you kind of have to ignore the good stuff as well. Like, it's lovely to hear, but you can't let it actually be the thing that fuels you or makes you happy in this world. You've got to be you've got to be confident and comfortable in what you're doing and love what you're doing, and then you kind of have to put it all to one side.
I think you're, again, to use that word, pragmatic about it. I know that I look on X, Twitter very much, but I was looking on it yesterday, and there's a celebrity there, and he was getting into this phenomenally heated argument with somebody who'd said he was a bit crap about something, and he was effing and jeffing, and I was thinking, whoa. I actually took a photograph of it and sent it to my friend saying, don't you love the friendly banter on X? But I mean, real heated awfulness. And you think, I would never want that as part of my life. I would never want to get that carried away with it.
No, and listen, we know that those platforms especially are driven by traffic and by negative traffic a lot of the time. So by their very nature, they essentially reward that type of behavior, which is horrible in itself. But yeah, like that sort of, we said this sort of early on in the thing, like, it's not the real world. It's all made up. And that stuff's even more made up. So you kind of you absolutely need to, but the difficult thing about it not being the real world is it does still affect you. Like, you with the best will in the world, you see something about yourself and you do feel it. Now, you have to learn how to process that and live with it. But, most of the time, with the best will in the world, it does hurt a wee bit.
I can't see how it wouldn't. If somebody saying something about you, and even if you think, they're an idiot or they don't know me, then, Let me ask you a couple of quick questions. And I promise, because your agent has said, I need him back. He's got something else to do afterwards.
Got another one, yeah.
Yeah. So let me just say, so what does ambition look like for you now? What going forward? Do you know what I googled? I googled JJ Chalmers' book, and you've not had a book out, have you? So...
No, I've not. And I would like to write one, partly just so I can, write stuff down, so then I can begin to not forget it because it's dramatic, but just I feel like I'm holding on to it. Exactly. And I just feel like, do you know what? It'd be nice to just put it down in writing and know it's there. I'm dyslexic, so I'm not much of a reader. So I know that I'll find it a tough process. But I would love to do it, and one day I will. I just need to find the right format for it as well, because I want to do it my way, and probably, hopefully, only ever do it once. If you're going to ask about my ambition and what I would like to do, and I've thought about this a lot, particularly recently, as I've sort of redressed, that my life in the last year, and in light of my mental health in particular, I'm in a good place. And so I suppose in some ways what I'd like to do is just keep on doing it, and that's tricky in itself. This is a fickle industry I work in. Now, I've managed to change from I need to keep doing this because it's what defines me, and I've worked so hard at redefining myself from my previous career into this one. I'm just doing it because I actually genuinely love it now, and I would like to just do it for as long as people will have me, basically, whether that's my bosses in various departments across different channels, or more importantly, the general public. They're the ultimate arbiters of whether I get to work or not, really. And as long as people want to hear from me, I want to keep talking to them. I want to keep using the platform that I'm, honored to have to, there's the old shine light on things that I care about, but equally just be part of things which I care about. Getting to present things like the Olympics it's a huge privilege, and I love sharing my enthusiasm for it with other people. So yeah, I'd just love to be able to keep on doing what I'm doing. But if it does go away tomorrow for no reason, or for a good reason, I'd like to think, and I've got to this place now, that I'll be okay. I'll figure out what comes next, because I did that once before.
What a great place to end on. Thank you. JJ Chalmers, thanks for joining the ScotsCare podcast.
Oh, honestly, thank you so much. It's been an absolute delight to have I'd say we've had a blether this morning. It's good, isn't it?
It's definitely a blether. Yeah. I think I need a coffee now. Yeah.
Yeah, go for it.
Right.
Bye.
ScotsCare supports Scots in need across London. Your donation, big or small, helps us do more with our services. Head to scotscare.com and click donate.